Now, one of the first things that we said in the last message, and this is just recap, the temptation, that temptation is a necessary part of the Christian journey. We ought not to expect that the Christian journey is simply about, the roses and relaxation and just having life as easy as, one, two, three. Oh no. If we are going to grow and move from maturity to maturity as God has called us to holiness, and holiness cannot be, if we're going to live out holiness, then we must be matured. And if we are going to mature, then we must go through some temptations. And when the temptations come, we can't keep falling every single time. I hope by now that you would be learning and seeking to pass your test. So temptation is a necessary part of the Christian journey. That's number one. Number two is that the intensity of your testing is tantamount to the seriousness of your calling. So as Jesus entered into the wilderness, it was not some minion, a little demon from hell that came to tempt him or to test him. It was the devil himself. After 40 days and 40 nights of fasting, so he must have been really hungry, weak physically, beat out. I don't know if anybody ever just not eat for one day yet, or you feel headache, stomach ache. Sometimes, depending on if you're having a stomach problem, you might really feel some cold sweater wash you and your belly a gripe because you just need something. You can't go no longer. Just imagine that's one day. But Jesus went for 40 days and 40 nights without eating anything, and the tempter came. I want to say to you and to emphasize again, for those of you who are going through a wilderness experience, remember this was right on the heels of Jesus' baptism. And the Spirit led him into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And coming out of the wilderness, he went right into ministry. And that is just me preempting myself about part 2 of this message, because today we are going to talk about the wilderness as transition. The wilderness as transition. So the intensity of your testing is tantamount to the seriousness of your calling. The third point that I want to remind us of is that the devil is not afraid of our fasting and prayer. So don't you think that because you are fasting and praying that the enemy is not going to come your way and trouble you. And if they can't trouble you, they're going to trouble your family members. The enemy is not afraid of our fasting and prayer. As a matter of fact, sometimes it appears as if he is attracted to it. Because the moment we decide to fast and pray unto Almighty God, we are, whether we know it or not, whether we want to admit it or not, we are entering into spiritual warfare, frontline duty. And so the enemy will come with his best to get you to be distracted, to get you to turn your eyes off of God, to get you to backslide, to get you to sin, to get you to fall down to temptation, to get you to transfer your worship from the Most High God to the created being called Satan. The devil is not afraid of our fasting and prayer. Fourth point that I want to remind us of is that it is better. Remember that Jesus was hungry after 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, and the tempter came. So he was hungry, and the first temptation was, Jesus, just turn those stones into bread now and eat. What is so wrong with that? Hungry will kill you anyway. Why don't you just turn those stones into bread? And Jesus said, no. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. And the principle here is that it is better to be hungry than to be fed fed as a result of disobedience to the will of God. I don't know what you might be hungry for, but there are too many Christians who feel comfortable running ahead of God and not waiting for God to be the one to provide the thing that you need. And then you get to a place where you become confused because you have now tied up yourself into something that God didn't provide, and then you want to bring it to Him to ask Him to bless it, but God don't bless illegitimate and sinful things. It is better to be hungry. More Christians need to go hungry, feel hungry, deprive yourself of some things and wait for God to provide it for you. If God puts you in a place of deprivation, then it is for a purpose. Do not try to change your situation simply on the basis of satisfying your physical needs. It is better to be hungry than to be fed as a result of disobedience to God. Believe, I want you to let that sink in, because I want you to really let that sink in. How 40 days of hunger feels. Just imagine how his body would have been skin and bones. Nobody thinks that just because it's Jesus, he was in the flesh. Nobody thinks him never lose weight. Oh my God. Because he had not eaten for all of this time and physically weak. But then he said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. I want somebody to understand that wherever you are experiencing a lack, whatever the desire that you have, whatever the need that you have or the want, the enemy will tempt you right there in that area. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to give in to that temptation, or will you wait for God to provide? When God provides, him do it good enough. God provides, him do it very well. God knows how to provide and when to provide. So more Christians need to depend on God and wait on him to provide that thing that you are praying for or that you need.